I saw Louis C.K. I saw the documentary. I thought it could have been better. I didn't feel like they talked to enough people. I wanted them to talk to have more of a range of people. But I did think it was a well done documentary.
I think that the story is incredible. And I think what Mike Schur said, and I'm in no way trying to blow smoke up his keister, he had a line at the end where he talked about how the line keeps moving and how difficult it is to make decisions about who you work with. It's the artist talk that Mike Ryan and I spoke about so many times from COVID on till today. And he had a very interesting point about Louis C.K. And the documentary talks about what he did, which the story is just unbelievable. It's not as crazy as Harvey, but it's right up there.
Really?
And because I never view Louis C.K. in the light and having the power that Harvey had, but he did some just sick, disgusting, ridiculous stuff. And then he doubled down on it when he made his return only 8 or 9 months after being canceled by saying, "Hey, that's my thing. I do that thing." And my view when I was watching is, well, wait a minute. You're not allowed to do that thing. We can all do a bunch of things. You can have your own thing, but your thing better not interrupt or be offensive to other people's ability to function or live or ruin their lives. And his thing did that. And that bothers me.
But if you're trying to just salvage your career, I thought that if anyone was equipped to sort of try and figure out how to manage, however it is that you manage the public space of trying to get back in the game cleverly, that he could do it. And I didn't think he did it particularly well by just dismissing it as his kink when it affects other people and you sort of need consent if you're going to be, masturbating in front of people and you have the power over them like that.
And what struck me, what Dave Chappelle did, and obviously he likes to touch the third rail from time to time, but for him, the way he did the victim blaming, saying just hang up the phone if you don't like what somebody's saying, just walk out of the room. So many comedians came to Louis C.K.'s defense during this occurrence. It just made me crazy that how can anyone actually think that way? Because comedy is when you tell the truth and when you make people laugh or think about things they otherwise wouldn't think of. And then they say, wow, that's funny. That makes sense. There is no world where it's funny to call someone on the phone and start yerking your yerk. It's hard to imagine.
What is it that you found interesting about it? Well done, poorly done? Would you recommend it, the documentary?
I would recommend it if you haven't read the articles. I didn't know enough about the story. So for documentaries, my criteria is that did I learn something that I didn't know? Could it have been presented better with more guests, with more interviews? Of course, but I just learned a lot more and then did some more reading after, and that to me makes a documentary worthwhile. So I would suggest watching it. And it will inform you as you decide about artist versus art. And that's a subject that really comes up a lot these days.
I feel a bit flimsy in lobbing the criticism that I wish they had talked to more people, because what becomes evident in both that documentary and the one on Spacey is you're already a victim. And then once you start talking about it, happened with Weinstein as well. Once you start talking about it, you become all the more of a victim because of the way you end up getting attacked. I know that people know that in theory. To watch human beings under the duress of it, when they become defined by this thing Louis C.K. did to them without their consent, when it becomes something that becomes a stain on who their identity is, and then on top of that, they get attacked because people really like Louis C.K. and they don't want to believe some of this stuff. When victims become all the more victims is one of the things that I get most uncomfortable around this. The lack of support from people who don't even have a dog in the actual intimacy of what it is that's happening, but they have a fandom here. And God knows what else men have when it comes to loneliness and hang-ups with women that makes them attack women when they've already been victims.
And I also found it tough to watch that the women who were the victims, they were painted as though their lives were not good anymore, that their careers were ended. And that may be true, and that's part of the story. But we put it in a way that Louis C.K. comes out like, hey, everything's great. I'm rich, getting richer, still good. Everyone loves me. And these women who had the really the guts to go forward to the New York Times and then to again relive it in this documentary. They're painted in a way, and it was filmed in places that made it feel as though that they had not in any way been allowed to recover, notwithstanding even the documentary, before the documentary, and that's sad too.
No, had their lives ruined by this. Like had their lives had their lives ruined by being Louis C.K. adjacent. That's what happened. I give credit
to Mike Schur as well for him to relive his decision-making process with Parks and Rec and having to examine the decisions that he makes as someone who is in charge of fame. That's when you're a great writer and producer, you are a star maker, and you've got to be careful which star you make, and sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And his desire to go back on film, because I hadn't really seen him in a documentary before, to go back on film and discuss this, I thought was a brave choice.
Well, because he felt like he was part of the problem, because it was an open secret. Everyone knew it, and no one did anything about it. Everyone knew it and expected someone else to do something about it. On the Spacey documentary, Samson, one of the things that I thought was most interesting, because they had on camera just a straight Marine who had some difficulty getting on camera to talk about the Spacey stuff, because other Marines were telling this Marine who had been subject to assault from Spacey, they were saying, I would have done this, I would have done that. And he's like, no, you wouldn't have. You wouldn't have done any of what it is that you say you would have done. And then he had to leave the interview, and he was cursing himself because of how powerless he felt in the face of being subject to someone else's power and not feeling like he could do anything about it.
If you watch a documentary, if this guy didn't say anything in that spot, you can't really armchair quarterback that one.
I thought it was super interesting the way all of that was framed. They take a Marine who is he's even sitting in a way that says to you, I'm on the cusp of Green Beret masculinity, however it is that you define masculinity. And that guy was having all sorts of trouble and felt the need to talk about how powerless he felt, and had to walk off of camera and start cursing himself because he couldn't keep under control how it is that he felt powerless in the face of tiny Kevin Spacey.
I got to tell you, I don't want to watch either of these films. It makes me feel so awful just hearing you talk about it. Like, it's so morbid. I'm sure it's really well done. I don't want to sit there and watch this, and then I want to sit in a corner and in a ball and just cry. Yeah, I don't want to watch either of these films.
I was actually thinking, I didn't continue watching it because I asked myself at a certain point, like, why am I
myself feel that
why
way.
am I going to continue watching this? Because I kind of know Spacey's side of things, and now I'm just kind of rubbernecking someone else's assault, which I felt bad about. But I thought about it today because it's the 26th anniversary of Saving Private Ryan. Now, Kevin Spacey says there's an allegation from this individual that Kevin Spacey was pleasuring himself when they went to the movie theaters to watch Saving Private Ryan during that scene, which is kind of a Mandela effect because it's not the opening scene, but it's kind of considered the opening scene. And Spacey's defense was, I've never seen Saving Private Ryan.
I don't think that ostrich head in the sand defense is one that we should use here, Zaz. I think that just because you don't want something to exist, you can't turn away and make it not exist. I think it's important for these stories to be told. And the documentary you're talking about is Spacey Unmasked, and it got a lot of criticism. And Kevin Spacey has been on PR 101 as he's been fighting that documentary and trying to get his life back, claiming poverty and that he wants another chance and that he was never convicted and he was actually acquitted in England. And it is worth watching because it will just broaden your horizons.
Well, I don't feel like it's head in the sand, as if, hear no evil, see no evil. I know these stories. I watch the news. I know what went on with Louis C.K. I know what went on with Kevin Spacey. But here, by watching these films, it's like, here, you know how terrible it was. You know these are bad people. Find out more morbid details and feel even worse. Like, isn't that what
He's had to have watched Saving Private Ryan. Everyone's seen it.
Thank you, David Samson, for being on with us. I can't believe the idea of pleasuring yourself to Saving Private Ryan. What you're saying is not unique. You are not alone in not wanting more information about this. I do wonder, though, the murder podcast industry is doing great, so it seems like some people want more information on the morbid stuff.